In this video, I'll cover blatantly discriminatory models, those that take a protected class directly as input. I'll go through the ins and outs, and then in the next two videos, I'll show the trends and make an argument against authorizing this practice. So, without the right precautions, machine learning will explicitly penalize underprivileged groups. If left unchecked, the algorithm will sometimes, for example, count a black defendant's race as a strike against them. Now, the first and most fundamental precaution against this is to simply disallow protected class variables as inputs to the model. Make the model blind to directly accessing race, religion, ethnicity, etc. That's common practice. However, some machine learning experts are calling to let down that safeguard and unleash explicitly discriminatory models. They campaign for allowing race and other protected classes as model inputs. They argue that computers should be authorized to make job, housing, and incarceration decisions based directly on race and other protected classes by allowing them as independent variables that are input to predictive models. This would mean that a model could explicitly hinder, for example, black defendants for being black. So imagine sitting across from a person being evaluated for a job, a loan, or even parole. When they ask you how the decision process works, you inform them, for one thing, our algorithm penalized your score by 7 points because you're black. This may sound shocking and sensationalistic, but I'm only literally describing what the model would do mechanically if race were permitted as a model input. Totally plausible. It's exactly the kind of thing branches of a decision tree could do or the weights of a linear model. And it's exactly what some machine learning experts are endorsing. Now, to clarify, when people talk about machine learning bias or algorithmic bias, and you may have already seen a fair amount about that in the press, they're actually in most cases referring to something else. Inequity in model outputs, even when protected classes are not allowed as direct inputs. It turns out that other variables can serve as proxies to protected classes, and so we still see unbalanced false positive rates even with that precaution in place. For example, the model falsely flags a felon as high risk for future repeat convictions even when unwarranted. Such false flags happen more for one group than another. So we're actually going to cover that topic later in course 3. For now, I'm starting with explicitly discriminatory models first, since it's a less technical topic in nature and because it deals with more fundamental ethics. After all, understanding discriminatory models is arguably a prerequisite before exploring algorithmic bias. We must more fundamentally agree that decisions should not be based explicitly on a protected class before we can agree they shouldn't be inadvertently and indirectly based on a protected class. I find it surprising that explicitly discriminatory models have received so much less coverage. Okay, so let's get to it. We'll use the word discriminatory for decisions about individuals that are based in part on a protected class. Discriminatory model. A predictive model that includes one or more protected class as an independent variable, that is, an input. Exceptions apply when decisions are intended to benefit a protected group, such as for affirmative action, when determining whether one qualifies for a grant given to members of a protected group, or when determining medical treatment by gender. So, for example, profiling by race or religion in order to determine police searches or extra airport security screening would be discriminatory. Decisions made by a discriminatory model meet the very definition of inequality. For example, in predictive policing for informing pretrial release, parole, and sentencing decisions, the model calculates the probability, the risk, of future criminal convictions. If race is included as a model input and the data links race to convictions, showing that black defendants have more than white defendants, then the resulting model will penalize the score for each black defendant just for being black. Equitable decisions by such models is all the more important as new laws in the US mandate a heavier reliance on algorithmic decisions for criminal defendants. Some machine learning experts, even in machine learning fairness specifically, advocate for discriminatory models. I'll mention a couple machine learning professors here without naming them, but if you'd like the names, you can look up my San Francisco Chronicle op-ed on this topic. A 2018 paper co-written by a Stanford University assistant professor who holds 2 appointments in engineering departments as well as the sociology department criticizes the standard that predictive models not be discriminatory. The paper recommends discriminatory decision-making when protected traits add predictive value. In a related lecture, this professor said, quote, "We can pretend like we don't have the information, but it's there. It's actually good to include race in your algorithm." And so does a University of Pennsylvania criminology professor who's been commissioned by parole departments in Pennsylvania to build predictive models. In a 2009 paper describing the application of machine learning to predict which convicts will kill or be killed while on probation or parole, he advocates for race-based prediction. Quote, "One can employ the best model which for these data happens to include race as a predictor. This is the most technically defensible position." So, if it helps improve models, is inputting a protected class clearly wrong? It's true that the members of a discriminated group won't feel good about it, but it's just a fact. Life's not fair. We can't shy away from turning people down from jobs based on all kinds of other factors that aren't protected. So why should this be any different if it's based on empirical facts? And if it's wrong to do this, what exactly is the argument against doing what appears to have the most rational utilitarian value? In the next video, I'll show why discriminatory models and policies are on the horizon and how much precedent already exists. Then, in the video after that, I'll make the argument that discriminatory models violate the principles of social justice and civil liberties.